It's the Tim and Renee Real Estate Talk Cigar Show.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tim Jackson with Berkshire Hathaway, and
Renee Candler with Root Mortgage here in Clackamas, Oregon.
so Renee, what are we going to talk about today?
Oh, I'm excited about today's conversation. Today we're going to be talking about what is the process, right? If you are ready to buy a home, how does this all work? And so today Tim and I are going to talk about the process as a whole, right? It's important for us to work together as a community, right? We are a family attached, the realtor, the loan officer, and the client.
Mm-hmm.
And so our conversation is going to be how is it that we work with each other
And
to
we'll
best
probably-
support the client.
We'll probably pull in the title as well, because they're also kind of a fourth wheel in the whole process.
No, that's good on my title company. I love my title company.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
But what was I gonna say? Well, we're kind of gonna go over the A to Z. You know, where do we start? Like, I mean, buying a house isn't an overnight process.
That's right. Yeah. Once you're ready and you say I want to buy a house, what do you do?
Yeah.
From that moment until you actually get the keys
Mm-hmm.
and get into your new home.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the process was. I've had the process be any number of days, months. It's never been years, luckily, but for my own personal experience, it was a 6-month process from A to Z.
Yeah.
I've had buyers that it was a 10-day process.
Isn't that something?
But that's, it's just different. Different buyers have different methods and different things they're bringing to the table to make these timelines work how they do.
Yeah. And throughout this conversation, we're going to be enjoying some delicious coffee and 2 Punch cigars. So are you excited about this, Tim?
This is great. Punch was my first cigar I ever had.
Really?
Yeah. I bought a Punch EMS London Club from the Hawthorne liquor store when I was going to college. I think I just turned 21. And so I saw it sitting in the case. And it's still one of my punches or some of my favorite cigars yet.
Have you had this one?
I don't think I have. I know I just smoked a punch a couple days ago. But I think, is that the bare knuckle?
Yeah, I have the bare knuckle in my hand.
Okay, I've had the bare knuckle. I had something that looked just like this wrapper, and I'm gonna have to go back to my wrapper collection and see if it was the signature.
Cool. I'm gonna light mine up.
It's a good cutter. I heard recently. Who was telling me this? But they said Michael Jordan almost cut his finger off with a cigar cutter at one point. Because he always smoked those cigars in the. It's actually my pastor. He said, yeah, Michael Jordan smoked so many cigars. Because I've always thought it was so cool how. I'm not a particular fan of basketball, but I always liked Michael Jordan because he was in that 90s Corvette with the cigar on the side of his mouth. And I'm like, that's just the epitome of cool to me.
Man, you're talking to a Chicago boy. You know I was raised in the city of Chicago in the 90s to see those 6 championships. Leaving high school to go to Grant Park to witness those celebrations. It was awesome. The city was so electric. So when you mention Michael Jordan, I get excited because of the memories that it brings. And that man was awesome, right? When you think about it. As a basketball player, I can't imagine someone being better than what I got to see throughout those years. That's a different video.
Yeah.
It's not this video.
I've always been jealous of Chicago residents when Jordan was playing, and for Italians when Ferrari wins a race. Because those are just 2 celebrations that I wish I was, born into.
Well, I'm excited for the Blazers to win. Can the Blazers win a championship? Then we can celebrate with them.
Yeah. I think they can.
Of course they can. Maybe not with this team, but they can. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so then as we enjoy the cigar, we're going to be enjoying a conversation. And I got to say, I love our time together. What a gift to be able to spend time with such a good person, to be able to kind of sharpen each other as we continue to work together, but also have these conversations to learn from each other. It means a lot to me.
Yeah.
I hope that those few that are watching these videos, that you're learning something too, and at least they can see that we care, right? We really care about real estate investment as a home and as an investment, as an opportunity to raise your family, to increase your wealth, to begin building generational wealth. What an opportunity. And when
Yeah.
you find people that you care about, that you love, that you're able to work with, and to be able to do it in this manner, it's a gift. It's a privilege. So thanks.
No, for sure. So starting from the A to Z, I mean, like we said, this process can take, it can take months, and I think it should take months in the situations that require it, just because you really want to think methodically and carefully, and really, I always tell clients sleep on it. That's probably one of my favorite things to tell a client is sit down, talk about it, sleep on it. Like it's not like going out and buying a game console or buying something that you can just quickly snap up. A home is something that if you're doing it right, you're going to live in the home on average 7 to 10 years. I've had clients that have lived in the same house for 40 years. And so it's a process that does go quickly at times, but if you're gonna do it right, make sure you're taking it at your own pace, and that each step of the process I think is a learning experience. And I mean, like you said, we're educators. But you want to make sure you understand why each thing is happening, what's happening at each step of the way. So I mean, I think the place that you start is realizing that you want to buy a house. And I mean, you can come from, it could be because you're moving out of town, you're renting and you're just tired of seeing that monthly rent go out the window. There's numerous reasons you're going to want to buy, but I think the first thing is going to be, I want to buy a house. That's going to be the starting point, is your desire to own a home and to start building equity. So you would naturally reach out to somebody like myself or Renee and say, hey Tim, or hey Renee, I want to buy a home. Where do we start?
Yep, that's right.
And I think we both agree that the first step would be setting the parameters, right?
For sure. Yeah, first you want to find someone you trust, someone that you can relate to, someone that's going to give it to you straight.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times, some people are afraid to give the answer of, okay, it's going to take 3 months or 6 months, or this is what we got to do in order to get you prepared. And so what you want, especially for those of you watching this film, what you want is someone that's going to give you an accurate timeline, and more important, an accurate understanding of where you are in the buying process.
Mm-hmm.
So along our conversation, we're going to go and we're going to talk about the connection, right? I want to buy a house. I know to go see Tim, he's my realtor. I know to go see Renee, he's my loan officer. That connection to then the pre-approval process, which essentially is the application of a loan, so that you as the client know how much you can afford. From that process, it's then going back into the realtor's hands, so that the realtor can work
Right.
with the client to find the home or that in that range that they can afford.
So let's go over the pre-approval process really quickly. Like, I guess 2 questions is A, how long does pre-approval take?
Mm-hmm.
And B, what is it that you're going to ask for? And I guess the third question, not to stack too many, is what dictates the pre-approval? Like, what are you going to be looking for?
Sure. Yeah, good question. So you want to be pre-approved. There is a distinction between being pre-qualified and pre-approved. Pre-approval is the process that the loan officer goes through to ensure that we've calculated your income correctly, that we know your debts correctly, we know your credit score. We go through a revision period to understand exactly how much one can afford. So your end goal in this first step is to become pre-approved. To be pre-approved, you need to fill out an application. That application is where you fill your personal information, right? Your date of birth, your social security number, your residence history. We need 2 years of residence history. So if you've lived in your current home for less than a year, we need that address, and we need the other address.
Yeah.
We need 2 years of work history. A lot of folks that are coming from college and they're in their first career think that they can't be pre-approved for a home because they don't have, quote unquote, 2 years of work history. But you can use your college transcripts to prove that you had at least 4 years in that process, along with your current work history, to be able to approve. So you need the 2 years of work history. You need to authorize the credit pool. You need to authorize e-consent so you can sign things electronically.
Yeah.
You submit that application. From there, you need a certain set of documents.
Right. And I've also heard that new jobs are also something that deters somebody. But let's say somebody's just transferred jobs and they're W-2. How long do they have to wait? Assuming they've got a 2-year history behind them, how long do they have to sit on that new job?
That just depends on why that person transferred from one job to the other. If it's within the same industry, they're okay. They don't have to wait.
Right.
Yeah, so that should not pause someone who wants to buy a home from going through the pre-approval process. So I would say go ask those questions and apply. Once you submit the application, the documents that are needed is an ID or a license. You need the last 2 months of bank statements. Those bank statements prove that you have the funds to either put a down payment and or pay the closing costs.
Sure.
You need the last 2 years of W-2s. If you're self-employed, it would be the last 2 years of tax returns. And you also need the last 30 days of pay stubs if you're a W-2 employee. That's it.
Right.
Those are the documents that are needed in order to begin the process.
Yeah. And maybe to rewind this back a little bit, but we're not going to ask for a pre-approval just to speak to us. If this is simply you want to find out more information, I've had buyers that are a little bit skittish, like I don't want my credit pulled or I don't know if I'm ready yet. Then it's easy enough for us to go get coffee, do a Zoom call, whatever you guys are comfortable with, to just start the conversation and say, hey, and even if it's just giving us numbers, well, this is what we have, this is what we're working with, and this is what we're thinking. The pre-approval process is going to be the first step in opening that door and saying, okay, we're going to commit, we're going to do this. But if you're borderline, like, I don't know if I'm ready or I'm not sure, we're not just going to say, hey, send the paperwork and we'll figure it out. We can have a conversation and say, hey, what are you making? Like, what are you looking to do? What do you want your monthly payment to be? And the pre-approval process is going to start unlocking those answers, because Renee's going to be able to crunch all these numbers and give you solid answers from that. But yeah, don't think just because we're not going to ask for paperwork just to talk to us. It's not it's not like that, where we're open books and we will give information, even if it means, maybe I wait for another year and then we submit pre-approval. I say it is a process, and even if the pre-approval comes back and says, we need to work on some things, it's a 3 to 6 month process, maybe it's great because you've started that first big step into homeownership. And for me, I think I was even thinking about buying a home 3 years before I bought. And I reached out to one agent. He never followed up with me. He kind of gave me a little bit of an education. But to me, I always promised when I had that experience was I want to be the agent that if somebody reaches out and I tell them they might not be ready for another 3 years, whether it be education or income, or not education, whether it be income or work history or debt, I'm not just going to drop you and say, you're not worth anything to me. That's people aren't numbers. I really want to be able to stick with you and encourage you. I've had buyers that have paid off college debt while they were waiting for a year. And I just remember, and it was months before they even bought, I remember texting them, just checking in, and they said, we just paid off our college debt. And just that little celebration was just so worth keeping in the loop with them. Because I know that college debt is such a burden on a lot of folks. I remember paying off my college debt and feeling this weight was lifted.
No kidding. Well, it definitely is an exciting I think it's an exciting process, but I'm going to be real too. As the mortgage advisor, as the one that's asking you for documents, it comes to a point where you wonder, okay, I gotta get this document, I gotta get this document, I gotta get this document. It feels real, right? Like it feels like work at times. And of course it's gonna feel like work because you're about to buy the beginning, an anchor of that generational wealth. So when it comes to the pre-approval process, you want someone that's going to treat you the way that you should be treated, with respect, and as someone that also respects your time, to give you the information accordingly.
Right.
So the pre-approval process begins with that application, a submitted application, and then those documents, your
Sure.
ID, last 30 days of pay stubs, last 2 months of bank statements, and last 2 years of either W-2s or tax returns.
Yeah. Because I've had buyers that want to write offers and look at homes before we have pre-approval in place, and that's putting the cart before the horse, or the horse before the cart.
The cart before the horse.
Cart
Yeah.
before the horse.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah.
But you don't, even as a seller, if I have a listing, I don't want buyers coming through that don't have the means to purchase the home. So you want to know, first off, what are my parameters? Can I purchase this home? And what are the numbers? We don't want to waste, as professionals who run busy lives and busy schedules, and I'm sure your schedule is just as busy. The biggest thing about pre-approval is it takes, 2-3 hours at most? I mean, that's 20.
Yeah. So the pre-approval process, which includes getting the application submitted and then the documents, and I have to say I am so grateful to be at Root Mortgage. Root Mortgage, a local lender in Clackamas, just right in front of the Kaiser Hospital, has structured itself in such a way where it's a team. And so I have a partner, Heather. Heather's amazing.
Heather is awesome.
Heather is amazing. And so as a team, we work to get through the application quickly, efficiently, but more importantly, correctly.
Yeah.
And so I would say let's give it 24 hours once we get those documents, because what we do is either Heather or I jump into the application, review the documents, make sure that we have everything that we need from those documents, start plugging away and essentially seeing what the debts are, what's the credit score, what's the credit report, what's the income, and how much of that income can we use.
Yeah. I've had Heather literally on a Sunday afternoon. I forgot the exact circumstances, but it was a serious buyer. Everything was in line, and we just needed a couple more things. And she just took the time out of, I think she was taking the day off intentionally, wanted to relax. And she still went to work and said, hey, don't worry, I've got you. And she took that 30 minutes out to get us to where we needed to go. To me, that is a huge testament to just how the power of the team and having people that are willing to work just as hard as you.
We are a team rooted in service, and so our role is to serve those that are seeking the support. So once we get that pre-approval process, what comes with it, and you know this, especially when it comes to the offer part, is a pre-approval letter.
Yeah.
And within that letter, it essentially states that these clients or this client can afford this home at this price.
And it speaks to the strength of an offer, because if you think about it from a seller's standpoint, they don't want to get into contract with a buyer that hasn't been properly vetted and is not, if you say, well, this is a $700,000 home, for example, and I've got it, but there's no proof, that seller doesn't know you from John, and they're going to say, where's the proof? And even within the Oregon contract, there's a place where you check buyer has attached pre-approval or buyer has pre-approval yet to come. I have, unless in the rare circumstance where somebody wants to offer and pre-approval's coming, I will then call the agent and say, hey, pre-approval's going to hit by tomorrow morning because my officers are on it. They're just checking the documents. But 9 times out of 10, that pre-approval is wrapped up in the offer, ready to go.
Oh, yeah.
And very rare circumstances do you ever offer without that pre-approval. And if you're offering without a pre-approval, you're either paying cash or you're already like 10 steps ahead and you're like right there at the finish line. You're just buttoning some stuff up. But there really is, it's always better to have pre-approval out of the way before you even look. Because I have had circumstances where, let's say a buyer's just waiting on the sidelines, waiting for the right property to come around. This is where I see it most often, is they don't want pre-approved. They don't want to be actively shopping. They just say, hey, I know when the right property is going to hit. You send me some properties. I'm going to be able to know the right one. Friday rolls around, the listing goes active, and all of a sudden we're 2 o'clock on a Friday. Let's get the pre-approval. We can work that fast. We can get it done. It is an example, though, where they're now thinking about, is this the right home? Now I've got to send documents. They're doing a lot of things at once, and it's less appealing in my eyes than just saying, let's get pre-approval taken care of, get all the documents taken care of, make sure we're good to go, and then we'll set up the search parameters. and then we'll look at, okay, you're approved up to 600,000. This is what the monthly payment's going to be like.
Mm-hmm.
We can go over all of that, and it'll give the buyer just the certainty of knowing, what are my, like looking at a map. Where are my limits? Where can I?
Sure.
Yeah.
So those of you watching, don't be too concerned, right? The first step is this pre-approval process, a completed application and those documents. When we have that completed, we review, and then I invite you into a meeting. That meeting could be a Zoom meeting or it could be in person, whatever is more comfortable to you, so that we can review those numbers, we can review those options together.
Right.
If you're comfortable and you want the realtor there, so if Tim is there with us, then what that allows is for efficiency, because then we're able to have the conversation at the same time. If the realtor isn't there, it's okay, because what I do for you is I reach out to the realtor. I reach out to Tim and say, hey Tim, I just met with these clients. This is the range, and this is what they're comfortable looking for. So after that happens, Tim, it goes back to you as the realtor. How does that process work? 'Cause I think this is step 2 now, right?
Right. We've gotten them pre-approved. I would set you up on a customized home search, and I've got a very unique way of doing it. I've had clients tell me that the home searches I send them are actually superior to Zillow and Redfin and all the big search engines, because I'm able to customize it down to beyond just beds, bathrooms. We're talking the whole 9 yards. I can look for shops. I can look for beachfront. I can look for acreage. I can look for master on the main. I can look down to style of home, really floating homes. The list goes on. I can dial it down to, you want a wraparound porch? We'll get you a wraparound porch. Zillow's not going to show you wraparound porches. Zillow's going to show you just the meat and potatoes. And then it's also just going to show you what Zillow wants to show you.
Sure.
Zillow's got their own agents that pay for
Leads.
$4,000 to $5,000 a month to show up. Zillow and Redfin are corporations, whereas I'm an agent working on your behalf. You don't see corporation. You don't see you don't see shareholders and stuff when it comes to working with Tim Jackson. I'm a local business owner, and I'm gonna know the local market in a way that I can set up and cater that home search to the exact home, so that way when it comes up, it doesn't get lost beneath all this. There's just so much noise out there as far as advertising this home for sale, that home for sale. What does it all mean? It could be a cash or a fixer home, and now you're wasting your time. I've had folks that, they're a conventional loan, or maybe they're FHA or VA, and they keep getting cash or fixers on Zillow, and I am able to set the search up in a way that I'm not wasting your time or getting your hopes up on a home that's just not going to qualify. So my job is to kind of weed out all these homes that you're not going to be able to. Trust me, I've done it a million times where a buyer said, I want this home, I like the price, I like the area and everything. I don't like delivering the news that the home's not going to work. I would rather start off on the right foot and send you properties that we can walk in and you could make an offer that day.
That makes sense. So then once the clients meet with me as the mortgage advisor, they are pre-approved at a certain amount. I share that information to you.
Right.
You start creating that engine that
Yeah.
shows homes to them via, I'm guessing, email.
Yep.
And
we'll
then
do
do
email.
they reach out to you and say, we
Yeah.
want to see this home?
Yeah. So there's 2 different methods. Email's a really great way, and I'll set it based on how often you want to be. If you're very serious, I'll send homes every day. If you're like, I'm waiting, I want the right home to come across once a week. And if you're really just like, I just want to see what's out there, not ready to make a move yet, it can be once a month. But if I know you're super serious and you've really set up a search with me and we're in communication, I text direct links and say, hey, what do you think of this home?
Okay.
And so I'll do my own custom filtering through that search. It's not just an automated. I use all the tools provided, but then I also go in and do the heavy searching myself. And I should say, I think there's 2 different things we should talk about right now. Is one, when you're looking at homes online versus seeing them in person, it's a very different experience. I've had buyers down in California that are on the video call, and even that's, not quite like walking through the home itself. But it's also the way a home is marketed. I know how the sausage is made because I worked as a real estate photographer for 5 years. And the real estate photographer's job is to bring in this wide angle lens, blow everything up and make it look as wide as possible, to lighten everything up. So the home is going to look a lot brighter than it is in person most of the time. It's going to look a lot more colorful. It's going to look a lot more artistic because you're trying to share a vision of this is what the home
Sure.
looks like. And not a lot of the time, but there's times where we're slapping lipstick on a hog, and a lot of real estate photography, not a lot of it, but sometimes it would feel a little bit dishonest. Like, wow, these photos look so much better than the home. Like, I feel bad for the numerous buyers that are going to come in disappointed that my photos were so good.
Well, that happens all the time because
Yeah.
I have clients telling me that all the time. Oh, I saw this beautiful home in the pictures, and then when I went over there, the floor was so uneven you couldn't even play a marble game on it.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, it's funny you say that. I don't think you could play a marble game on our floors in 1909. But that's true. And yeah, the photographer's job is to make everything look level and, not chaotic. You move clutter out of the way, you make sure everything's cleaned, everything looks staged, like nobody lives there. There's a lot going on behind the marketing that, if you take the staging out, what does a 1990s home look like if you don't have all this modern furniture in there? These are things where you're going to get the keys after all the staging's moved out and be like, oh, this home looks a little bit different from what I was looking at. So just knowing how the sausage is made and really knowing what you're going to get into is important to know up front. I don't want to be the realtor that leaves somebody with a surprise after they've got the keys.
Yeah, and that's what I love working with you about, or one of the things I love working with you is we value the client's time. And so a couple of things that we even discussed already on this video is, first step is pre-approval because we want you to know your range. And then the second step, once you start getting homes from Tim, it's to actually visit the home. And that's an investment in time. But what you're saying is you listen to the client, you understand what it is that they're truly looking for. You create this engine of homes to go to their email or text because of what you've heard. So that even when they look, their time is being valued because it's homes that they're really, truly interested in.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a bit of an art. I mean, I would say that if you're I want to say rational, but a buyer that knows what they're looking for, because sometimes it takes a little bit of searching, but I've had buyers from out of state, no idea what they were looking for, no idea about the area, didn't know anything. It took 12 homes to get them to where every home we were looking at was it.
Okay.
I mean, or very close to it. There wasn't any like major, this isn't in the right area. I had it dialed in. And so I would say that just like, I don't want to waste your time showing you homes that you're never even going to think about. It does take a little bit of dialing in. There might be, within the first few, hey, I think this one's worth checking out because of these features. But I always take that active feedback of looking at the home and saying, what did you like? What didn't you like? How are we going to update our search?
Yeah.
I don't want to continue showing you homes that are in a busy area or that are really close to the neighbors if you're going to disqualify that every single time. If you say I didn't like the proximity to the neighbors but I could live with it, I'm not going to update the search as much as, I really don't like the fact that the lot size was small. I don't like how outdated it was. Mm-hmm. That home was in the 70s. I had some buyers that every single home that they sent me was dated to the 70s. They would walk in and almost immediately disqualify it. So I said, okay, let's start looking at either newer construction or homes that have been remodeled. But I don't think it's worth your time to look at homes that are dated to the 70s if you're instantly going to think about the work it's going to take to bring it up to date.
Sure. One, the money. Not just the work, but then the money, because you have to consider that.
Yeah, and this was a retirement age couple that were looking for the resting place. They weren't looking to put anything into the home. They wanted it ready to go. We ended up writing an offer on a 2018 build that was everything that they were looking for.
Perfect.
So.
Okay, so then we know that once we get pre-approved, we start seeing homes come into our inbox via email or text, start visiting homes, and the reality that we have yet to speak of is today's market. And we recently got the new data from the month of September, right? We're now on October 14th.
Right.
We got the data this week that shows listings are down, sales are down, pending sales are down throughout the month.
Right.
And in the same comparison of time over time from last year September to this year September, it is also down. However, home values are still up in comparison from September of 2021. And if I remember correctly, the average sales price is 8.2% higher than what it was this time last year.
Right.
The average, or not average, the median sales price is almost 9% higher. So we have less sales, values are still higher, and now inventory is starting to creep up. What does that mean for today's buyer?
I mean, I think it shows how good of an investment real estate is. Inflation's at the CPI just came out at 8.3. If you were sitting on cash right now, you would have lost 9%. If you had bought into the stock market, you'd be down 25%. If you'd bought gold, you would have been down 20%. If you'd been into crypto, you would have been down over 50%. Real estate is, I think, going to adjust over these coming months, but not in a way that other sectors have. And so I think what this is showing us is that real estate has so far been the best investment against inflation. Just as far as thinking about where do I put my money in an uncertain time. If you're renting right now and rents are going up 15%, purchasing a home is a sound long-term investment that's going to beat most of the other sectors that we just discussed.
Now, interest rates at the beginning of the year were hovering at around 3% in January of 2022. And as of today, they're around 7.25%. What's your opinion on purchasing a home where interest rates are now higher than what we've seen, since probably 2015?
Yeah.
2014?
Yeah. I don't like to sugarcoat it and say now is the perfect time to buy. I mean, that's the sales side. That'd be the sales side speaking. I think it's a great time to buy, but you should be offering like it's December. So don't be afraid to offer. And I think it all comes down to if you have to move, that's a different scenario. I've got people moving from out of state and they have to move, and we still get them a great deal.
Yes.
But if you are in the situation where you don't have to move, you just would really like to, then there's a certain way that you can approach this market that is going to be beneficial to you in the long run. And what that entails is, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think the first big one is I got a buyer in for $105,000 under asking price just a couple months ago. And so that's a big one, is just don't offer asking. Look for the homes don't look for the homes that don't need to sell. Because there's people out there right now that have their homes listed like it's May, and it's not May.
You're trying to say is they're asking for a high value.
They're asking for a high value, and you're not going to keep that built-in equity as a seller. A buyer's not going to bite right now at a 7% interest rate. A buyer's going to want that discount. And so a seller doesn't want to let go. They're not going to sell, I don't think. I mean, there's always that lucky Californian buyer that might come in who's oblivious, but that's getting very rare. I've got California buyers with cash right now that are not biting unless it's a deal.
Well, because you want to be a savvy buyer.
Exactly.
And you become a savvy buyer not just by knowing some information, but also by trusting the professionals to help with that decision making.
Yes.
So in our process so far, we've talked about pre-approval, we talked about the home search, and now we're starting to talk about the offer, right? So the third step in this process would be you found the home that you like, you put an offer on the home.
Yeah. And the likelihood of being the only offer on the home is very high.
So this is also a part of the strategy that's happening right now in today's market, right? Right now what's happening is someone is putting their home for sale at whatever the list price is, and we are seeing offers. The last 4 offers I had under list price with seller concessions. Seller concessions meaning the seller is giving the buyer credit to help pay for either the closing costs or, I'm going to mention the 2-1 buy down.
Yeah.
The 2-1 buy down is an option that temporarily lowers the monthly payment for the buyer within those first 2 years. So it's temporary, but what ends up happening is the seller gives what's called seller concessions to create an account.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to what we know as an escrow account, but this account pays a certain amount of money that equals 2% less in interest for the first 12 months. So the payments are going to be significantly lower, and then 1% less in interest for the next 12 months.
Right. After that, the second year.
After the first year, yeah. So
Right.
it's a total of 2 years where the buyer pays less.
Yeah.
Because of an account created by the seller concessions.
Right. And that would be an easy ask. I could sell that any day. Because you know what I would do is I'd call this agent, and every agent's aware of what's happening. I mean, it's not news anymore. It's kind of been starting to bake into the market and say, hey, do you want a buyer that's committed to this house, or do you want a buyer that's going to be afraid when they see that monthly payment and back out? Because the buyer can't pay for this 2-1. The seller has to pay for it. Correct?
The money either comes from the seller and seller concessions, from the realtor in giving up some of the commission, or from the lender in giving credits.
Sure.
And so what we've learned is that most of the time that money comes from the seller concessions.
Yeah. Because the seller's got all this baked in equity, and they're looking at they're getting nervous, and they're wanting to say, hey, I want to incentivize you to buy the place.
Yes.
So they're going to be willing to give that 12 grand towards this 2-1 buy down. And what it's going to do to the monthly payment is, because when I call that seller's agent and say, look, you don't want a buyer that sees the monthly payment of $4,500, $5,000 a month, because that's what a lot of payments are for even a starter. I mean, maybe not a starter home, but you know, a $500,000 house is creeping over $4,000 at 7.25. That's a pretty big payment. When you're making $80,000, $90,000 a year, that's a pretty big chunk of what you're making per month. It's nearing 50% of your income.
Sure.
Right? So if you can use that 2-1 buy down, which is a pretty unique product to Root. I'm not seeing this much.
Not all lenders have
Right.
the option of a 2-1 buy down, but
Right.
some do, and Root Mortgage is one
one
that
of
has lenders on our
Yeah.
lines that do offer the 2-1 buy down.
All to say, it is a unique product.
One, and I would posit that as a as a seller. And so I would even say, if you are working with the listing agent, it makes more sense to give seller concessions than it does to actually lower the price of the home.
Yes.
So let's go with that $500,000 home. The typical drop is 10% by the time it sells. That's a lot, right? A $500,000 home
It's 50 grand.
will sell at $450,000. Let's not even go that low. Let's say 5% at $475,000. A savvy realtor will ask for 3% seller concessions on a $500,000 home. That's $15,000 that the buyer's agent is asking from the sellers. Let's say that deal happens. That's a sell price, gross profit of $485,000 instead of dropping to $475,000. So even with the seller concessions, that helps pay for that 2-1 buy down and helps pay for some of the closing costs.
Right.
The seller is still making more money than they would if they would drop the price of the home.
And now the buyer's monthly income and what they're paying for the home is getting a lot closer to that 33% golden rule, where you really shouldn't be purchasing a home if the mortgage is more than a third of your income, unless you have some very solid financials and a very solid plan in place. But that 2-1 allows that 1/3 rule to come back into play, and it allows you to capture a time in the market where, frankly, we might not be this slow again, where homes aren't moving as fast.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to probably be the only offer. So like I said, you're going to be able to take your time and filter through these searches, like I said, and get this right home at the right price with the right payment. I mean, you can really have your cake and eat it too in this market. And I always like to quote Warren Buffett, who's the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, the company I work for. And I don't necessarily like the terminology, but he's an investor, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. But he said when other people are afraid, that's when you get greedy. Maybe you could change the terminology around to be like when other people are afraid, that's when you're courageous, right?
Yeah.
And that's when you're making bold moves in this market and saying, where is the deal? And it's the chaos, because there are deals to be had. And I'm excited to be purchasing my next home coming up in the next few months here. I think there's a lot of opportunity already there and right on the horizon.
Pre-approval, home search, offer. And right now, what we're both seeing in this market is that offer price is probably under list price and asking seller concessions.
Yes.
And so that's important to know. Those of you that are listening, you want to work with a savvy realtor that can negotiate that, right?
Yeah.
And to go back to the 2-1 buy down, I'll say it again, it's a temporary buy down where for the first 2 years, those first 24 months, the payments are lower because of the account created by the seller concessions. To qualify or to be pre-approved, it's still at the original note rate. So if today's at 7.25, we have to make sure that you are approved at that 7.25, and then you get the benefit of paying what is equivalent to 5.25 for those first 12 months, 6.25 for the next 12 months.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest skills a real estate agent can have is a real estate agent that hunts for motivation. And that goes on all sides. So as a realtor, I work with buyers that are motivated, because a motivated buyer is going to want to, I never push somebody into a house. A buyer that's motivated to get something done, I'm going to go 110% for them. But if you think about that if you hire me as your buyer's agent, I'm hunting for motivation on both sides. And like we were talking about, a motivated seller is what you want to be looking for in this market. And there's ways that I can search for based on days on market, based on price drops, based on, I like to call the seller's agent and have a good conversation. I like to ask, how motivated is your seller going to be to make this deal happen? Because I've got a buyer that's motivated to make this deal happen. And if you've got a motivated seller, we can make this happen.
Sure.
Right. And
Good.
so that's kind of step 3 is once we have all of that done, we should have an accepted offer.
Perfect. So now we went from pre-approval, home search, offer, accepted offer. That's where I jump back into the scene.
Yes.
Right? Once we get an accepted offer, there's a contract that's signed. That contract is then sent to me. I review all the details on that contract because I update the file. That's where then the client, we would look at what the rates are, because that's when we want to lock in the rate. There's strategy to knowing how to lock the rate. And when you find a good mortgage advisor, they'll show you the entire rate sheet. They'll show you the options. They'll show you what you can do. That way you're able to make the decision of what makes most sense for you and for your family.
Right.
Once that rate's locked, we send that file over to the investor and the underwriter. The underwriter reviews the file and typically asks for more documents. And so what I said earlier was, be ready, because when we get to this part of the phase, usually the contracts are 30 days on average?
Yeah, 30-day closing is pretty typical.
And so with that typical 30 calendar day average, we know that we have time to quickly get whatever documents are being asked for. So if the underwriter says, I need updated pay stubs, I need an updated tax return or bank statements, then we get those updated documents, we send them right to the underwriter, they review the file. That is their job. Their job is to make sure that we're following the guidelines created by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac in order to ensure that this loan will work well.
Right. And on the real estate side, you're going to have a 10-day inspection window, and that's business days in Oregon, calendar days in Washington. You can ask for a longer inspection. I wouldn't suggest a shorter one. The entire contract is up to us. When we write it, I'll be asking all these questions. Normally, I'll suggest a 10-day inspection. I've got I'm going to say the best inspector in Oregon, Matt Febb with Timberline Inspections. He's found problems that no other inspector, I've got real life examples where a buyer's backed out because he found a $150,000 issue with the trusses being cut out of the home, which that takes then an engineer to come back in and recreate the trusses. Like $150,000 had there been a big snow, the roof would have collapsed.
Oh my goodness.
We're talking about a life and death inspection here. And he had my buyer. I'm glad that my buyer backed out of that transaction, and somebody came in after the fact. They didn't, this agent didn't disclose it, and somebody bought it for all cash a few months later for the exact same price we had offered. And I called them and said, hey, does your client, I saw the sales price and I got very suspicious. And I said, does your client know that the trusses were cut out of that, out of the home? She said, I have no idea. I said, your inspector didn't call it out. Nope. I said, you should call a lawyer.
Yeah.
You know, because that's the big thing. These are, it's not just money. This is, a home can be, I don't want to put it too dramatically, but it can be a life and death thing. I mean, I look at it, you're putting your family in there. You want somebody that's looking at not just your real estate agent, but also an agent that works with the best of the best to make sure you're not only buying a sound investment money-wise, but safety-wise. Safety is the biggest thing that I call out in inspections. If something's not safe, if the railings on a balcony are not safe because a kid could slip through them, that is one of the first things my inspector and myself are going to call out and bring to that seller's attention. You want to make sure you're getting a home on a good foundation.
Mm-hmm.
A home that's not going to, the roof isn't going to leak when the first rains come. I could go on and on about why an inspection is necessary and why it's the best money you're ever going to spend. I really don't have to say it though. I mean, it just speaks for itself based on the results. And I can only say that my inspector is the best of the best. I would trust him every single time with an inspection. When I buy my own home, I'm going to have Matt look that thing over like he does in every inspection. And I'm going to be so glad that he did it. I'm going to feel so safe when he goes through the home. And once he gives it the clean bill of health or otherwise, you know. A lot of these items are things, you know, I say that my buyer backed out. Most of the time, items are able to be mitigated. You can put a new roof on a house. You can correct foundation issues, end up being a more costly thing, but you can correct foundation issues. The sewer line can be repaired. These are all repairs that I've worked through on both sides of the buy and sell. And that inspection period is very important to know, you know, what you're getting into from a financial and a safety perspective.
So we have the pre-approval process, we have the home search, offer getting accepted. From the offer getting accepted, that's where the timeline really goes quickly. Because earlier we said this process could be 3 months, it could be as quick as 10 days, it could be 3, 6 months, 9 months, it could be a year. But once we get the offer accepted, we now have a 30-day window to get the home inspected, get the home appraised,
right?
Make sure that we have any updated documents that we need to collect.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, the title company is also going to be, the title company is instrumental in making sure you own the title free and clear, that there's no liens against the property that you'll be inheriting, that the seller is going to pay off all these liens. Let's say they didn't pay a contractor. Contractors can put a contractor lien on a home that the only thing a contractor lien subsides is, you know, unpaid taxes on the home. But these are just all things that the title company is going to be working on your behalf to make sure so that they're out of mind, out of sight, paid off, good to go. When you get the keys, there's no deranged uncle coming who claims to own the property, or there's no neighbors disputing that this lot line is actually mine and they moved the fence over. These are all things that with a good title company, a good realtor, and a good inspector, you won't have any of those worries. So the title person's also going to be taking the earnest money check. That earnest money is just showing that you've got skin in the game, and so and they're also going to be the ones that you finally sign with after the inspection period's negotiated. One thing that I think buyers sometimes confuse, and it's understandable because it's a little bit confusing, is the appraiser and the inspector.
Yeah.
And I think the easiest way to distinguish the two is that an appraiser only cares about the bank. He works for the bank. He's making sure, because technically a bank's going to own the home when you are taking out a loan. You're paying off the bank over the life of 30 years, and it's a great opportunity to leverage, but it's also the fact that the bank is, you know, They're putting money down on this home for you, on your behalf, really, and they want to make sure that the home will appraise at value, make sure there's no major items. The inspector is for your benefit, which is why you pay for the inspection, is because it's so you can know that the home is good to go on your own, for your own knowledge, your own safety, and your own investment.
Okay, so we get the contract. The contract has the details of the accepted offer.
Mm-hmm.
Once we get the contract, the client has 3 days to deposit the earnest deposit to the title company,
Yes.
company that's referenced in that
Well,
contract.
Well, three days is general. Like that's like I said,
Sure.
everything's up for. I've had somebody that 14 days was the earnest money. They
Yeah.
didn't get paid for that amount of time, and they wanted to make sure they had the funds in place. So we put 14. I know.
As long as we get
Right.
to that timeline that's within that contract,
Yes,
right? So
yes.
the earnest deposit money is usually one of the first things that happens. The rate's locked in order for us to begin the underwritten process. We get updated documents if needed. The buyer then gets an inspector to represent their interests, right? Because the inspector's job is to make that house look bad.
Yes. You
That-
should be afraid after looking at the inspection report.
Once the inspection report comes, if there's any negotiations, then negotiations ensue. If not, or once those negotiations are fixed, we move on to the next step, which is the appraisal.
Mm-hmm.
The appraisal, as Tim mentioned, is when someone goes to represent the bank. Their job is to make sure that the house is worth what the offer's set at. After the appraisal, we make sure that the file is underwritten. That means the underwriter says, it looks good. There, the title company calls the buyer and says, let's schedule a time to sign. They sign that
Close.
entire document, right? That's the closing of the process. And then, depending on the time, the buyers either get the keys that day or the following day.
Normally 5 p.m. the day of closing is possession. But like I said, it's really whatever you want to make the contract. You could make possession. There's possession before closing. I've never done one of those, but it's possible. You can write the contract however you want. But we talk about typical 3 days to get earnest money. Closing's 5 p.m. the day of closing. Those are the most often seen. Just to rewind back to the earnest money, is that a lot of times people will freak out about the earnest money because it's money they're giving up before they have keys in their hand, and it makes them nervous they won't get it back.
Mm-hmm.
I will say 2 things. One, I've never had a buyer forfeit the earnest money on either side of a transaction. It does happen, but I'll bring up the circumstances in which it does after I say that you have 2 contingencies to get through, which is the inspection and the financing contingency. And if the home doesn't inspect and you reject it on the inspection, or if the home can't finance either because of the appraisal or because of your own finances, then you're going to get the earnest money back.
Mhm.
We just need it in writing from the lender that the buyer, does not qualify for the loan, and we have full legal reason to keep their earnest money. Now, the only time that earnest money is forfeited is if, let's say it's the day before closing and the buyer just gets cold feet. That is when, in the court of law, if you were taken to small claims, which is where the earnest money gets, battled over, there would be very little reason to say this buyer was acting in good faith and had legal reason to back out of this contract. And so that's really the rare circumstance in which the earnest money would be forfeited. But that being said, most of the time, even when it comes to small claims court, small claims will 8 or 9 times out of 10 side with the buyer, depending on circumstances. Obviously, there's evidence, but knowing an agent that knows what's at risk is really the most important part. You don't want to write a $5,000 check that goes to a seller because the agent wasn't keeping track of timelines or wasn't aware of, the consequences of the earnest money. There are consequences and there's reason, there's skin in the game, but knowing these reasons and knowing the different outcomes is, it's important.
Well, that's why you get a professional realtor to help you understand that process.
Mhm.
I find this time to be such a gift. And so Tim Jackson with Berkshire Hathaway, realtor Renee Candler, mortgage advisor with Root Mortgage, we're essentially answering the question, what's the process? I'm ready to buy a home. I want to buy a home. What's the process look like so I have an understanding of this home buying process?
Yes.
And we've said one of the first things to do is pre-approval. That's working with the mortgage advisor to understand how much can I truly afford? How comfortable am I to be making these payments? Once that information is figured out, we have a range that we could then give to the realtor. The realtor starts creating home searches and then starts taking the client to find the home that they like. Once they find a home they like, they put in an offer. Once the offer gets accepted, the timeline feels like it goes a lot faster, right? Because now we are under contract and we have 30 days to get through the inspection period, to get the updated documents, to get the appraisal done, to negotiate or renegotiate if we need to put in the earnest deposit as we mentioned before, and to then close on time.
Yes. And I've got a flow chart that outlines the entire process, and it includes what the realtor does from day one, what the lender does, and what the title company does, and includes the appraiser timelines and the inspection timelines. So really all 5 are wrapped up into this nice flow chart that summarizes in a closing and getting the keys.
So there's more flexibility from the moment the client meets and respects and chooses either the realtor or the mortgage advisor. There's more flexibility there because within that time, the client's learning, right? How much can I truly afford? You are giving documents and getting that understood.
Right.
Then you're starting to look for homes.
Yeah.
And however long that takes, that's how long it takes until you find the home that you want. Once the offer gets accepted, that's when the timeline is a lot faster. We have 30 days to complete.
Yes. And I always like to take this entire timeline and personalize it to somebody. So that way when we know what's going on, what they're looking for, what their worries are, they can address them. I can give them that flow chart, and then at any time during the process, we can circle back, do a phone call, in person, Zoom, whatever it may be, and circle back so that we're like, okay, we're at the appraisal point of the process. What's going on? What should I be concerned about? Because you might know the process from our first sit down, and that's my goal, is to educate you as much as possible on the entire process and to have Renee educate you on the entire process. But naturally, it is such a, I don't want to say complicated because it's not complicated when you know it, but when you haven't, especially for a first-time home buyer, it is very complicated, and there's a lot going on in the background that you naturally want to know what is happening, what's going on, and where are we in this process.
Yeah, and if you like watching these videos and you know that I'm a former educator, I am a teacher, assistant principal. I was a principal for 10 years. And so the education process is something that I truly believe in. I truly believe, as corny as this sounds, is that knowledge is power. My role isn't to tell someone what to do. It is to give the information so that they can make a better decision for what they need, either for them or for their family.
Yeah. Another one of my favorite lines is that you're writing the checks, not me. Yeah. You're going to have a mortgage payment after the whole process is done, and you should be glad that you're making those payments and seeing the benefits of building the equity, putting it back into your home. But at the end of the day, I'm simply guiding you through, and Renee's simply guiding you through the process, and you'll be writing the checks. Those aren't always the smallest of checks. I mean, your mortgage is about a third of your income. You want to make sure you're writing those checks with a smile on your face and know what's going on. And so that's really, like you said, our job is to educate, not to push, because at the end of the day, you know, you will be writing that mortgage paycheck when it comes due, you know, and you want to know.
And I'm grateful, and I said this earlier today, but I'll say it again, I'm grateful for the platform that Root Mortgage has created, because we are a great combination of a brokerage and a bank. And so typically when someone hears a brokerage, right, a broker has options. Usually a brokerage does not have control over the time, because if we have a list of options of investors or banks that are on our lines, the broker takes the best or the most competitive option at that moment for that family, and goes to that bank or to that investor. Now, the bank usually doesn't have options. The bank has, this is the rate that we have for today, this is the cost, but they have control over the timeline because it's done in-house. Where Root Mortgage has a combination of the two. We have the options. We have 12 investors on our lines, and once the underwriter says, yes, we're good to go, we take that file back. We have our own closing department. Now we have control over the timeline.
Right. And I should note that the timeline doesn't end when you get the keys, because I think at least the biggest complaint I hear about some agents or some point in the process is that once the keys are handed off, you don't hear from them again. For me, I stay in touch. Even if there's issues that come up with the home, I want to recommend, or, you know, homes need maintenance, they need folks to come in. I want to make sure you have all the resources available to make your home the dream home. You know, should you buy a fixer or a home that you've got a plan for? I also enjoy coming over and smoking a cigar after the home closes, if that's something you're into. But even if not, like, you know, I love to come over and just celebrate the fact that you have just made one of the biggest purchases you're ever going to make. It's an exciting thing. And years down the road, for me, it's not a transaction or just a business deal. For me, it's about putting families into homes, putting people into homes, and just watching their journey and staying up to date with it.
Well, we both give our cell numbers, and I think that's important to note. You know, you have my cell phone so that you can call me or text me whenever there's a question. I pick up my phone at night, I pick up my phone in the morning, because I really care about the process as a whole. I care about seeing a family get into a home, because I have learned over time the importance. Once you have a home, once you have money invested into a property, you have more options. You're able to do more because of the flexibility, and that's something that people don't think of.
Yeah.
They think that they have more flexibility when they are renters, and there is truth to that. The flexibility that you have is you're not tied to that place. And so people are fearful of being tied to a place, but the flexibility that you have is the money that's wrapped in the worth of that home.
Right.
And that provides options that in a rental you don't have.
Yeah. And I think it's really cool from our place in life is that I'm 29 going on 30. You just turned 40. I saw us celebrating at the
41.
41. Okay, because you were at Topgolf, right?
I was.
Yeah, that looked really fun. So I think it shows that we have decades ahead of us, because buying a home is something you're going to own hopefully for decades. And so having people that are in the business for years to come, I think is going to be very beneficial, that you're starting out day one with us, but we're not putting up our hats in the next year or two. Right? And I think that is a benefit, in that we're going to be here with a phone call 7 years down the road. Hey, Renee, I bought my home at 7%. What are interest rates at?
That's right.
You're going to be giving that up to date. You could save $1,000 a month on your mortgage because you're keeping up to date with them. They're going to be able to save. Hey, Tim, I really want to know what are some updates I can do to improve not only my own livability in the home, but I also want to make sure I'm putting away equity, so that way when it comes time to sell in 10 years, which is my plan, I want to know what are the updates that is going to also add value. I would love to come over and tell you exactly what my thoughts are. It's not, for me, it's not about just the transaction. Like I said, I want to be with you every step of the way, and to make sure that your full life of owning the home and any other future needs or wants or hopes are also addressed. So it's the A to Z process within one transaction, but really I take the first contact with somebody as the starting point, and really, you know, maybe I hope to hang up my hat when I'm 60 or 65, but that's quite a few years from now, you know. I mean, there's a long journey ahead should you choose myself and Renee as your real estate and mortgage advisors.
Yeah, so again, Tim Jackson, Realtor, Berkshire Hathaway, Renee Candler, Mortgage Advisor, Root Mortgage. In this video, what we did was we described the process to buy a home. So if you are interested in buying a home, what is that process? What does it really look like? And what you've heard so far is the first step is to make this connection. Make sure that you find a professional that you believe will take your time seriously and help you understand the process and understand your options.
Sure.
The process, once you make the connection, is to get a pre-approval, which is working with a mortgage advisor to know what's that range of affordability that I have. From there, you work with the realtor, you work with Tim to start looking at homes. You put an offer in on a home. It gets negotiated, the offer gets accepted. From there, the timeline speeds up because now we are under contract to finish the deal typically within 30 days. And that process is depositing what's called the earnest deposit, beginning the inspection period, making sure that we're locking a rate, getting the appraisal, getting in contact with the title company to schedule the signing, the closing, and then getting your keys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what you'll notice from the two of us is that we believe in this process. Personally, you've already heard me say I was an educator for 18 years, but I believed in the real estate process right away. I bought my home.
Yeah.
Nikki and I bought our home when we were 21, 22. Because of those real estate investments over time. It wasn't just the first home. We got a second home. We moved to Portland, got our third home. We were able to keep those homes in Chicago rented. When it came time to sell, we sold. We started flipping properties, right?
Yeah.
Because of the options that exist in this market. And because of those decisions in real estate,
Mm-hmm.
I was able to get out of something that was killing me.
Yeah.
You know, emotionally, mentally, physically, you know, it was taking time away where I had to realign my priorities. And
Yes.
I'm grateful to God that I was able to realign those priorities. And having the cushion because of real estate allowed me to do so.
Yeah. And I think to also speak to the longevity of us being in the industry is that, I won't sugarcoat this either, is that the market is turning in a way that a lot of folks might not be here in a year. And that's, you know, unfortunate, but I think it's just the name of the game. In 2008, a lot of real estate agents and lenders had to hang up their hats and say, look, I might not be able to make it in a market where pending sales are down 30%. For us, though, we come from the school of hard knocks. You worked in the Chicago school district, and then in Lentz, and was it Woodmere?
Yeah, I was in Portland Public
Yeah.
when I moved to Portland, in Portland
Yeah.
Public from 2013 to 18, and
Yeah.
then in North Clackamas for my last
Yeah.
2+ years
Yeah.
in the school system.
Yeah. So, I mean, being a teacher, a principal, an educator in those school districts showed you that you were willing to work on the ground with sometimes, I mean, joyful but sometimes difficult situations, and it shows
Yes.
that you come from,
Yes,
in my opinion, the school of hard knocks. And for me,
for sure.
somebody might say, well, Tim, you're 29, you haven't experienced much of life. I would rebut and say, I've got nearly 11 years in the Oregon National Guard. I've been to the Mojave Desert for over a month, and that was as a medic, and saw people coming in with 105-degree core body temperatures, and my job was to save their life because they weren't drinking enough water, because the supply lines were down and we didn't have ice to give cold drinking water to the soldiers. I have that 11 years of National Guard experience that gives me this mentality of I'm going to jump on a grenade for my clients, but it also gives me this resilience and this ability to look at what the market's doing from a long-term perspective. I don't have this short-term perspective. I've got, where is this market going to be in 5, 10, 20, 30 years? And it also gives me that stamina, and you as well, to say, hey, if you purchase a home with us, we're not going to be gone in this next market swing. We're not going to be making quick money like before the financial crash. A lot of lenders were making quick money, hung up their hats and said, I'm done, because the easy road is no longer there. In this market, the refis are gone. There's not any easy money to be made by a lender, so to speak. We both realize that this market is one where we're going to have to work harder for our clients. We're going to have to work harder for each deal, and we're going to be glad to do it.
That's right.
I mean, my dad just asked me, Tim, are you scared of what this market's doing? And I said, no, not at all. I'm excited. Because when things get a little bit more dicey, I think now is the opportunity to show my colors and say, like, you know, a year ago, no offense, but anybody could have listed a home and it would have sold. And anybody could have written an offer and said, just write $100,000 over and you probably would have gotten the offer even if there were 20. But I think now the market's turning in a way that who you choose to fight on your side is gonna have a lasting effect. You can't just go with,
Yes.
with a relative that's been doing it for a little bit and maybe has a couple deals under their belt. You want to be working with people that not only have done it numerous times and are going to be able to knock it out of the park for you, but they're going to be there in the future and work for companies that are going to be there in the future. Berkshire's been here since before the crash, and we're literally branding ourselves as the forever agent. And Root Mortgage came out of the crash and has been knocking it out of the park and is
Since 2014.
Yes.
And it's a great platform filled with great people. What you'll notice from us is we care about the person in front of us. This is truly a gift. Tim and I right now are smoking cigars because we enjoy cigars and we have the ability to do it. It is a privilege. This is a gift. And yet what's more important are the people in front of us.
Yes.
We care about the people that we're serving. We are technical and we understand the system.
Yes.
Once you learn the system, you can thrive in the system. And that's what I think our biggest advantage is. We have good people, we're technical, we give people the information that they may not want to hear, but the information that will create success in this goal of home buying.
Yeah. So,
Hey, how's the cigar?
yeah. This is great. I mean, Punches, like I said, were my first cigars, so it's kind of like going back to my first love. His Punch signature's really, really good. A really medium-bodied cigar, has smoked consistently the whole way through. And actually what I really like about it is it's probably been about 30 or 40 minutes, and I'm only halfway through.
Yeah.
Which speaks to the build of the cigar just being, you can even feel it. It just feels like just a sturdy cigar, and when I'm drawing it in, I can just, you're getting so much more bang for your buck based on just this build quality. It feels, there's some weight in my hand right here. And the flavors are great.
Yeah, I'm smoking the Punch bare knuckle. And I love the draw. I love the plume, right? The smoke. The flavor's delicious. And of course, anytime I smoke with a cigar, what's more important is the commitment of time that I'm making with the person in front of me. So that's what I really love about cigars. We've been able to drink some good coffee, smoke good cigars, talk about our passion in supporting people in this industry of real estate. And so make sure that when you are ready to buy, you're reaching out to someone that you care, someone that you respect, someone that's professional, and someone that can support you in this process. And I'm hopeful that it will be Tim Jackson from Berkshire Hathaway as your realtor, and me, Renee Candler, mortgage advisor from Root Mortgage, as your mortgage advisor.
Yeah. So we're going to finish these cigars here, and if there are any questions about what we discussed, you can direct message us, call us, text us, whatever it may be, preferred method of contact. But this will be on social media, so feel free to reach out there. And it was just great having this chat.
Yeah.
Look forward to the next one next month.
Cool.